Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking the fascinating reality of an animal that is just totally shrouded in dark myths, fearful legends, and pop culture caricatures. I mean, it bears a name that immediately evokes fire, brimstone, and terror, right? But, as we so often find when we really look closely at the natural world, the truth is way more complex, much more vulnerable, and honestly, a lot more interesting than the legend. Let's peel back the layers of the myth and look at the real animals surviving out there at the edge of the world. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture yourself standing in the dense, remote bushland of early European settlement in Australia. It's pitch black. And suddenly, echoing through the trees, you hear this loud, guttural, incredibly eerie scream. It's a literally spine-chilling sound, and it carries over huge distances in the dark. You can completely understand why early settlers, hearing these otherworldly shrieks, immediately associated the unseen creatures with something demonic. This famous vocalization is the absolute foundation of their terrifying reputation, and ultimately, it's exactly how they earned the name Devil. And when those early observers finally caught a glimpse of the creature making that sound, well, the visual seemed to perfectly match the auditory terror. Just taking in that classic, fearsome open-mouthed stance, with the sharp teeth bared and jaws opened impossibly wide, it absolutely looks the part of a vicious predator. Even their scientific name leans hard into this gothic horror narrative, Sarcophilus harrisi, which roughly translates to Harris's flesh lover. No way, right? It's a highly dramatic presentation, carefully crafted by nature. But as we're about to see, looks can be deeply deceiving.
So, what are we actually dealing with here? To understand this creature, we have to look at its scientific classification. The Tasmanian devil is a carnivorous marsupial. Now, we all know marsupials, mammals that carry their young in a pouch, like your kangaroos or koalas. But unlike those famous herbivores, the devil's diet consists entirely of meat. And what's truly remarkable here is their scale. The Tasmanian devil holds the record as the world's largest carnivorous marsupial. Hearing a title like World's Largest Carnivorous Marsupial just adds a ton of weight to that formidable, intimidating reputation. It sounds like the description of an absolute apex monster.
Adding to all this mystique is their extreme geographic isolation. You're not going to find these guys roaming across vast continents. They are native solely to the island state of Tasmania, tucked right off the southern coast of mainland Australia. Being entirely restricted to this single isolated island means they've evolved in a highly specific environment. Now, this isolation makes them incredibly unique for sure, but it also paints them into an ecological corner, leaving them uniquely vulnerable to any changes in their one defined habitat. All right, let's start breaking down the physical reality behind that world's largest title. The numbers we're looking at right here, 50 to 80 centimeters, represent their total length. That translates to roughly 1.5 feet to just over 2.5 feet long. When we hear world's largest meat-eating marsupial, our minds might instantly conjure up images of bears or big cats, right? But in reality, their footprint is remarkably compact. And that compact size is further reflected in their weight, which ranges from just 4 to 12 kilograms. That's about 9 to 26 pounds. Think about that for a second. The world's largest carnivorous marsupial, a creature literally named the devil that screams in the night, essentially has the dimensions and weight of a stout, medium-sized dog, like a pug or maybe a small French bulldog. The massive monster reputation is just entirely disproportionate to their actual physical reality.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is just how stark the contrast is between the legend and the lived reality. On one hand, we've got the myth, the fierce appearance, the bared teeth, and those loud, eerie screams. But on the other hand, we have the reality. Despite all that posturing, Tasmanian devils are actually incredibly shy creatures. They do not seek out confrontation with humans or larger animals. In fact, they're mostly active at night, using the darkness as a cloak to avoid trouble, just quietly going about their business while the rest of the world sleeps. Their diet further shatters the illusion of the bloodthirsty hunter. I mean, while those powerful jaws and sharp teeth look totally capable of taking down large prey, they are primarily scavengers. They're basically nature's cleanup crew. Their diet consists heavily of carrion, meaning, animals that are already dead. When they do hunt, they're only going after really small animals, insects or birds. That incredibly wide jaw isn't for attacking large beasts. It's an evolutionary tool designed to crush the bones of scavenged carcasses so that absolutely no nutritional value goes to waste in a harsh environment.
And this brilliantly illustrates our point. When we revisit that fearsome open-mouthed stance, we can now see a completely different story unfolding. When a devil opens its mouth like that, it isn't always aggression. Actually, it's often a display of fear, uncertainty, or essentially just a giant bluff to make itself look scarier than it actually feels, so it can avoid a real fight.
What we are really looking at is a shy, nocturnal scavenger, a vital part of the Tasmanian ecosystem, just trying to survive underneath a very fierce, deeply misunderstood exterior.
Well, unfortunately, the story of the Tasmanian Devil takes a very dark turn when we look at the present day. Despite overcoming centuries of human misunderstanding and intense persecution by early farmers who wrongly blamed them for livestock deaths, the species is now facing a desperate battle for its very existence. The threats they face today are severe, complex, and pushing them dangerously close to the brink.
The single most devastating threat right now is something called devil facial tumor disease. This is a rare transmissible cancer, meaning they actually catch the cancer from one another, usually through biting during mating or when they're squabbling over scavenged food. It causes these aggressive tumors to form around the face and mouth, which eventually prevents the animal from eating and leads to starvation. Since it was first discovered in the 1990s, this incredibly specific and brutal disease has absolutely decimated the wild population, wiping out massive percentages of the species in just a few short decades.
So the crucial point is, a species dealing with a catastrophic disease outbreak desperately needs environmental advantages to bounce back, and the devil simply doesn't have them. This brings us to habitat loss. As human development, agriculture, and logging expand across Tasmania, the devil's natural environment shrinks. This forces the remaining healthy populations into smaller, heavily fragmented areas. Not only does this reduce their access to food and shelter, but it pushes them closer together. And you can guess what happens next, right? It tragically increases the rate at which that facial tumor disease can spread. We started this journey looking at a monster of myth, but what we actually found was a shy, ecologically vital scavenger the size of a small dog, currently fighting a tragic battle against a devastating disease and a shrinking home. The Tasmanian Devil is a completely unique piece of our planet's biological puzzle, which leaves us with a pretty haunting question to consider. Will the eerie screams of the world's largest carnivorous marsupial, a sound that has echoed through the Tasmanian bush for thousands of years, ultimately be silenced by disease and habitat loss? It's a stark reminder of how fragile even the fiercest-looking creatures truly are, and why understanding the reality behind the myth is always the first, crucial step toward conservation.